Look, we know things are bad for young people these days. It's depressing. I spend all my day researching the addiction economy, reading about how big companies create and profit from our addictions to gaming or social media or whatever. But I went to Anthropy, an event that brought together some of the biggest business leaders from across the country to think about how to make the UK a better place. And I went around and I asked them, well, what is the biggest opportunity to improve the lives of young people in the UK? And I left feeling pretty hopeful, because everyone had an interesting thing to say. My first interview, it was a guy that was into energy, and I thought, well, not the sexiest topics for young people. But he explained his vision for a peer-to-peer energy system, and it changed my mind.
I work for Rowan Energy. We're a green tech business. If you can imagine having a community that has a battery facility, for instance, and during the day we can charge that battery facility using solar or wind or any other renewable. We can also take cheap electricity off the grid and move it for free into that battery facility. And then during the day when people actually need that energy, we can provide that energy to them at much lower cost because we bought it at a lower cost. And so if you look at what the average retail customers paying in the UK for electricity right now, probably one of the highest costs for energy in the world. Like why? We could provide it a fraction for that, right?
I work for a charity called Escape to Make in Lancaster. They've done their own research on young people in Lancaster, and the feedback they've been getting is that young people just want a space to be themselves. Offline, they should be designing whatever space they want, but just to be themselves, learn to be themselves in ordinary one-to-one and collective group conversations, just by learning those social skills which none of us have taught them and that have been fed by online companies taking advantage of their innocence. And I think they just want a space where they can meet others like them, become and grow into themselves just by doing simple things. They tell me that all they want is a space where they can try anything, actually. Photography, cooking together, gardening together, simple stuff. It's not hard to enable all this. And I've seen young people in Lancaster grow and grow and grow upon this simple nourishment of a space that they can call their own, no adults involved. They run their own company, they're on their own board, they decide what they do, and people will fund that for them. It seems quite simple to me, and that's the generation I think that will probably save us. So we really need to invest in them.
I think it's all about public spaces and green spaces in a way that promotes intergenerational contact, that's community-led and community-owned. And I think it's quite easy to say that we need more of these things, but I do think it requires structural change. It requires rethinking of how budgets are spent and how markets allocate resources. And I think it at the same time, though, also provides opportunities for young people to get involved, to be able to own their spaces, shape them in a way that caters to their needs.
Now, you might think, who cares about these spaces? But I'm going to use a famous psychology experiment as an analogy to connect it to the things you might be seeing in your life. It's called Rat Park, and roughly you put a rat alone in an empty cage with morphine water and normal water, and the rat gets addicted to morphine. But if you put a rat in Rat Park, fun things to do, exercise, other rats to play with and, have sex with, then drug use plummets. But what's happened in the UK recently, partially thanks to austerity, is we've just stripped away all the things that used to connect us. The community, the after-school clubs, the youth clubs, the team sports, the places where young people could just meet and relax, just gone. And we're wondering why we're more isolated and lonely than ever. All while the things that addict us, the gambling, the social media, the porn, the nicotine, the food, has been made to be more addictive. And we're wondering why we all can't control our usage of these things. Well, that's the point. That's the whole point.
Young people are undoubtedly in a tough place right now. I myself am the mother of a young man who is one of those COVID-impacted kids. And he believes, rightly or wrongly, that everything is out there for him to self-educate himself. And I think what he therefore lacks is some sort of framework to put it all into. And I would suggest that the education system is broken because it's not just failed those kids during COVID, but it's failing to understand the future they're moving into. So I think what would really help them is if a lot of organisations around education who think they're doing the right thing took an almighty step back and had a look at the future that young people are growing into and how they can be a meaningful part of it.
I think schools have huge issues around sanction, so what boundaries are children set, what guidance are they given, and I think we have abandoned a generation of young people. Actually, we're not taking responsibility at all to listen, sit with them, work with them.
My great example of that right now is with my young friend Sam, who is in his late teens, but has recently joined the board of trustees of the British Museum, because the British Museum has a policy now, a very new policy, of including a very wide age demographic. And I think if more organisations who think that they're adult organisations started to think of themselves as people organisations and included younger voices and give them a platform on which they can develop the way they articulate their opinions and put them in places where their opinions can really make a difference, because it's not our future, it's theirs.
What I find interesting is when you meet someone for the first time and they don't ask you what you do, they ask you where you're from. If we can start to restore a sense of place, a pride of place, we can start a story that includes community, that it's not about the economic value of each individual person. If you want to allow young people a chance to build a sense of pride, a sense of place, ask them where they're from. Give them an opportunity to talk about where they're from. Give them an opportunity to talk about what's wrong with it, what's right with it, what they enjoy about it, who their friends are, what their community looks like, whether they even think they have a community. If you can't start a story that doesn't start with what's your job, what's your economic worth, to a largely anonymous globalised system, then you're not really going to see much change.
So we grow king prawns on land in Scotland. We're looking at sustainable aquaculture rather than the stuff in the sea, and we're looking at making it circular. I've been told by numerous people that what we do is completely impossible and can't be done, and I love it, because you can just say, well, come and have a look. And in terms of what I would like for young people, be brave. Be brave. When somebody tells you something's a completely crackpot idea, or it can't be done, or it's impossible, ignore them. Have a go anyway. Failure teaches you an awful lot. Fail fast, fail cheap, have another go. Doesn't matter. You've got to remember that the whole establishment and grey-haired people like me, we don't like change. And the whole thing is engineered to maintain the status quo. You know that thing about thinking inside the box? What you're going to think about is that box is trying to hold you in, it's trying to make you think small. Forget that, think big, blow a hole through the side of the box, go think big. Don't think outside the box, just get rid of the damn box.
Get rid of the box, love it.
Society is just trying to keep the status quo, because if you're part of a big corporation or you're part of the political structure, you're looking at what happens at the next election, what happens in the next 5 years. It's not important. What's important is what happens in the next 50 years, the next 100 years. That's what's important. So yeah, think big or go home.
So for the young people still watching that don't want to go down this far right route, it is literally up to us to create the positive vision of the future. And that's what I hope this addiction economy thing could be. You know, fund the places where young people can meet and relax and, you know, grow, while restricting the power of the industries that intentionally addict us and steal our freedom. That's the plan, Addiction Economy. Subscribe if it's interesting. But yeah, let's do it.